we're going to be discussing getting a DIP, otherwise known as a decision in principle or also agreement in principle, when you'll need a DIP and how this impacts your mortgage journey. Hello, welcome back to our channel and podcast. My name's Gemma, and here at WS we talk about all things relating to money, mortgages and positive money mindset. So if that interests you, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the thumbs up. It really helps with our YouTube algorithm and means that you won't miss out on any of our videos. On today's episode of Let's Talk Money and Mortgages, we have Ifti joining us once again. And for those of you who don't know Ifti is a trained accountant and mortgage advisor who's been in the industry for over 10 years. And he is also one of the founding directors here at WYS. Hi, welcome back Ifti. How are you?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. How are you doing, Gemma?
Very good, thank you. So today we're talking all about DIPs. So let's get straight into it with what is a decision in principle or an agreement in principle?
Okay, yeah, it's the same thing effectively. I hear the words mortgage promise, mortgage in principle, decision in principle, agreement in principle. It's all the same. Yeah, it's all the same thing, right? But some people think it's different. So this is just a promise from a bank to say this is how much you can borrow as a number, say 100,000 or whatever the number is. It's a promise, but subject to checking your documentation and subject to you being honest with the information you provided and subject to doing a valuation. So subject to those three conditions, the bank say, okay, this is our promise. So that is called an agreement in principle or a decision in principle.
So it's a promise, though, like just to let people know, it's sort of a letter, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a letter and it's no guarantee, right? Because like I said, they are only saying subject to various things. So if you provided false information or if the underwriters see something that they didn't expect, something which is outside the norm, you're not going to get that, right? But it's the closest you could get to a mortgage offer before the application stage, right? So it's for people who are mainly looking at houses. So yeah,
because that was my next question. People might ask, when would I actually need to get a decision in principle?
Yeah, with the decision in principle, most of the time we tell people who's buying houses to get a decision in principle before you start looking for houses, because you need to know how much you can borrow, right? So if not, you might look at a house which you can't afford, right? So ultimately you'll be disappointed, right? So it's always sort of best to talk to a bank or talk to an advisor and get a agreement in principle in place. So that gives you the confidence as to how much you can borrow. And then, you know what your budget is going to be then. And then you can start looking for houses. So you want to do this as early as you can in the house buying process.
Yeah, because I think during COVID especially, some estate agents weren't even taking viewings without a decision in principle in place, were they? So
that's right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, estate agents usually insist on this one because they know that somebody's checked your information. Then they have some confidence in you, right? So I know for a fact that a lot of estate agents without a decision in principle, they don't even submit your mortgage offer. But you're right, during COVID, they were very strict. They didn't even show houses, right? So this is something you want to get done up front for sure. Very early stages.
To look more serious. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
So who can give out decision in principles? Obviously, we can as mortgage advisors, but is there anyone else?
Yeah, so decision in principles generally come from the bank, right? It's not from a mortgage advisor. But obviously, mortgage advisors put this on their letterhead and give it to you. But it's usually backed by a decision in principle from the bank, right? So the mortgage advisors will log into most suitable bank for you and they will get a decision in principle and they'll give it to you. They can either give you the lender's decision in principle or they can put it in their letterhead and they can give it to you. So that's the way you normally get it,
Yeah, great. And so can an agreement in principle strengthen your position then when you're buying a house?
Oh, yes. Like you said, I think you answered this question partially before. Sometimes estate agents don't even show you the house if they can't see an agreement in principle, and they will not allow you to make an offer if you don't have an agreement in principle, because otherwise it will look silly, right? So they make an offer to the seller, and if you can't afford it, the transaction is not going to go ahead, right? So they will make sure that you have this in place. So very rarely you can get away without one, right? So that's why I'm saying trying to do this as early as possible is always helpful in the process. Yes.
Yeah, and going back to the lenders, so if they're going to issue you with an agreement in principle, what would they ask you to provide before they can give you one?
So lenders are only going to ask for information, right? So they're not asking any documents at this stage. So you just need to be mindful of that. So doesn't mean that you can just give round numbers, right? I have many a times clients come to me saying, okay, I ask the question, so how much do you earn? They go 50,000. But that 50,000, if somebody earns 50,000 just as a basic salary, and maybe somebody else earns 50,000, part of it being salary, and let's say 10,000 as bonuses and commission, the result's going to be very different, right? So this is why you need to be very accurate, right? Even though these documents are not required at this stage, share your pay slips, share your bonus statements, share your pay slips with commission, because that will help you get a more accurate number. They also look at things like your expenses. So, share your bank statements, because there might be unusual expenses in your bank statement, like expensive hobbies. I always bring this up. So if you have an expensive hobby, the lenders don't look at it in a positive way, because they think, it's a habit, so therefore it's a commitment, right? So it has to come down as a commitment. So that can affect your borrowing. So somebody who earns the same amount as you, who has less expensive hobbies, may be able to borrow a little bit more than you, right? So that's why you need to, even though any documents aren't required, it's a good practice if you share this information.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to sort of make the point that even if your decision in principle letter says you can borrow 300,000, say, it's actually not going to benefit you if really you can only afford 270, because ultimately, even though your offer might get accepted because you have this letter of agreement saying you can afford it, if you actually can't, then you're going to be in a bit of a tricky situation. So it's always actually better just to be honest when you have that initial conversation to get that agreement in principle, because it doesn't really help, does it, if you have, in reality, you can't get that amount.
That's right. Not at all. So that's what I'm saying. Even though it's not a full application, try to divulge as much information as possible and try to produce all the information up front, because that will get you very close to the maximum borrowing amount that the bank will allow you. So that will be the basis for you to look for properties. Yeah.
So how long does an agreement in principle last for?
Okay, this really depends on the bank. Banks give you agreement in principle anything from 30 days to 4 months, right? So it really depends on which bank you go to. But most of the high street banks, they give you up to about 3 months, because otherwise you have to get another decision in principle. So therefore, they give you about 3 months, but it really depends from bank to bank. So again, brokers will know if you're in a rush and you're nearly done with getting your house, we might just take agreement in principle which is valid for a month. But if you're at early stages, it's always good to go for a decision in principle which is valid for a little longer, right? So that will help you.
And can you extend these agreements in principles?
Yeah, you can, right? So with the agreement in principle, you can always extend it, right? Or run another agreement in principle. But it has its own risks, right? So if you're doing it after, say, 3 months when it expires, not a problem. But try not to run too many agreement in principles at the same time, because I've heard clients come to me and say, oh, X bank has a good deal, let's do a decision in principle with them, fine. So they have not even found the property, but 2 weeks down the line, they say, Y bank has a good deal, shall we do one with them as well, right? So that's not a good practice, because if you run too many agreement in principles, that can have an impact on your credit score, right? So you have to be very careful.
As an agreement in principle is kind of just like a piece of paper which states that this is something you might be able to afford. Why would people think that they should go to the bank which has the cheapest rates? Like, why would they feel like that was a good thing to do?
Yeah, so people will generally do that because, again, they look at places like price comparison sites, or they say, okay, my friends got a mortgage from them and they had good experience. Why don't we go with that lender? People come up with those arguments, right? I mean, we don't encourage that. We just say, okay, let's just go to a lender who potentially does a soft credit search, but again...
Because it's afterwards, isn't it, really, that is like when you actually apply for a mortgage that you can actually properly find the right mortgage for you. It doesn't have to necessarily be the one.
That's right. As much as possible, we tell just to go to a lender who'll just run a soft credit search, who doesn't leave a footprint on your credit file, and who will help you get a mortgage. But we don't have to stick to that lender if that's not the best deal for you, right? So closer to the time, there might be a cheaper lender, then we can go there. But it's only just to say, okay, this is how much you can borrow, right? So obviously we have to be realistic about that number. We can't go to a lender which will give you 5 times income, but whereas you're only going to get 4.5 times your income, right? So we have to be realistic, but at the same time, we will see a lender who will probably do a soft credit search for you.
Yeah, because I think that's a bit of a misconception. People feel like they need to go with the decision in principle from the lender that they actually want to get the mortgage from. And I'm saying that actually, that's not always, it's not necessary, is it?
I mean, we keep changing, right? I mean, this is the job of the advisors. Like, if we apply to X bank, forget the decision in principle. Even if you make a mortgage application and we apply to X lender, if Y is cheaper tomorrow, we go to our clients and say, look, Y is cheaper. Do you want to go to Y, right? So we ask that question because, you don't necessarily have to stick to the same lender.
Yeah, definitely. So that's you kind of touched on it. My next question, does an agreement in principle affect my credit score?
Yes. If it is a soft credit search, which quite a lot of lenders do nowadays, it does not affect your credit score. But if it's a hard footprint, there are some lenders who still do a hard credit search. That does affect your credit score. So advisors usually know this. So it's always best to get some guidance on this one, or even if you go to a bank, just ask this question. Yeah. But at the same time, this is something that a lot of people don't know. If you keep running soft credit searches, 2 or 3 soft credit searches at a very short period of time, it could add up to being a hard credit search, right? So you have to be mindful of that, right? So just because a bank is doing a soft credit search, don't keep running agreement in principle in quick succession, right? A period of time. Don't do that, because it could turn out to be a hard credit search because you've done too many soft credit searches, right? So be very careful about this. Again, that's why I'm saying, it's always good to be with an advisor, and the advisor can guide you on this one, right? Because it will only help you.
Is there ever a situation where actually you'd advise somebody to go with a lender that does do a hard credit search for a dip?
Yeah, there are instances where we do that. So for example, let's say somebody doesn't have a agreement principle at all. They made a mortgage offer and the offer has been accepted. And we know the only lender who will work for them is a lender who will do a hard credit search. Because if that's the only provider who works for you, then we got no choice. It's no point us getting an agreement in principle from a lender who's not going to give you money, right? So then we have to go to that lender. So so there are exceptions, but as much as possible, maybe 90% of the time, you don't necessarily have to go to one of those lenders. But there are exceptions always.
Okay, and the last question I have is, do you have to pay for a decision in principle?
It depends on the broker. Quite often banks wouldn't charge for this one, but it depends on the broker. We as a company and as a policy, we don't, right? Our initial consultations are free. We do decision in principles for free, and also we do your mortgage application for free. I can't speak for everybody because, there are people who charge. I do understand why some people charge as well, but, that's their circumstances and their proposition, right? But there are a lot of people who charge nothing for their decision in principle, initial consultation, as well as the mortgage application. Because with some people, they don't charge you at decision in principle stage, but they charge you at the application stage. So you get bought out later. So just be a little careful about that one. But there are advisors who wouldn't charge you. But there are quite a lot of advisors who do as well.
Right. I just wanted to clear up that even after the initial consultation, we still don't charge fees, do we, FD?
Oh, not at all. We don't charge any fees. But there are brokers who will charge you later. When the mortgage offer is out or when your mortgage completes, they will charge you a fee. So, just be very clear on those things if you are using a broker, right? That, it's completely fee-free if that's the route what you want to go in.
Well, thank you, Ifti, again, for some more great advice. I just wanted to put our usual reminder out there that these points may or may not be applicable to you. So if you don't have a broker, I will leave our contact details below, as we're always happy to help. Otherwise, we do suggest that you talk to your broker just to make sure that these points are suitable for you. I will also just remind you that a mortgage is secured against your home or property, so it may be repossessed if you do not keep up with the mortgage repayments. Thank you for joining us again today. We'll be back next week with another episode of Let's Talk Money and Mortgages. Have a great day, stay safe, and we'll see you again soon.